Game of bat that was one.
Street, Troy, New York, and CB, Bryce Draper, and I spent a lot of time together, many happy hours in the Navy. I'll attempt to recap everything of his naval career, which is really my naval career. And it certainly has always been an important part of my life. And the wonderful part was, as I will talk about later, Bryce and Lucy were able to come east in 1968 on a trip and brought their family, and they stayed with us. At that time, we lived about 4 or 5 blocks away from here at 21 South Lake Avenue in Troy. Soon after, and in fact, Lucy and Bryce saw our land that we had here, we built this house because with 5 children we were quickly running out of bedroom space. But I guess I've said enough about that. The first thing to remember is that back in World War II, both of us, Bryce and myself, were in high school and graduated in June of 1944. And in order to get in the Navy, it meant, I'm sure it was in Bryce's case as well as mine, that we were already signed up when we were in high school. We had enlisted in the Navy, and they were interested in you finishing up and getting your diploma. So our story really begins for both of us when we went to 2 different Navy boot camps. In my case, I left in late June 1944 and went out to Central New York State to Sampson Naval Training Base. Admiral Sampson was some famous admiral, I guess, of the Spanish-American War, if memory serves me correctly. And all it was like a big Army camp or big Navy camp with lots of barracks and different units, as they were called. And probably at any one time, they were probably training, say 20,000 recruits. And they kept you there for a 12-week period in order to physically toughen you up, give you all the medical shots you'd need, the dental care that perhaps you'd need, and training in drilling and stuff like that. And so there we were, 17-year-old guys just out of high school. It was pretty impressive to us, and it actually wasn't a bad way to spend the summer. Now, as they say, Sampson Naval Base, if you were ever interested, is just south of Syracuse, New York. That's the biggest main city on Seneca Lake. At the top of the lake was a little town called Geneva, New York, which is a pretty little place. But we only got there once in our 12 weeks. They let us go up for a day's outing after we had done particularly good on inspections of our barracks. Now, what I'm telling you is probably identical to the situation that Bryce went through, because he, I believe, was up at Coeur d'Alene, Idaho. I'm quite sure he told me that that was the spot where all of the boots went from the western states. And if so, it was really quite spectacular country. So he was north of Utah, a few hundred miles, and I was west of where I lived in New York State, 150 so miles. But that's where the story really begins. And next I'll have to just tell you about how we got together. During boot camp, I should say this, during boot camp, they continuously tested the recruits to see what their aptitude was. For instance, if you seem to be able to pick up Morse code easily, you obviously were going to be in the radio shack of a ship. If you had no aptitudes, then you probably wound up in the deck gang chipping paint on a ship all day. But luckily that didn't happen to either Bryce or myself. We were very lucky. In my case, I got into fire control as he did. And when they said to me, "You're going to be in fire control," I thought to myself, well, I'm no fireman, and I don't really like to fight fires. But that's not what it was. It was really the aiming and the firing of the guns on the ship. And so anyway, all we knew, though, at this time in September of 1944 was that after we had gotten through our boot camp, that we were going to go to fire control school in Fort Lauderdale, Florida. Well, as they say, that appealed to us because the winter was coming on, and of course it was probably Bryce's first trip across the country, and it was certainly my first trip going down to Florida. I'd never been there. So, this sounded pretty Jim-dandy to us. And that's where we met, is at Fort Lauderdale, Florida. And that was September of 1944. And the real reason we got there was fire controlmen had to have excellent eyesight, and both of us had it, so that we would be able to use what they call optical rangefinders, which are simply a super-duper set of binoculars, and with little diamonds etched on them, and you could determine the range of a target by looking into this rangefinder. But you still had to have very good eyesight, actually what they call stereoscopic vision, in order to qualify. And that simply means in stereoscopic vision, you could tell which object was closer than another. Maybe they're both a mile or 2 miles away, but you could look at them, and through your God-blessed eyesight, you could tell when you put a diamond, dialed in this diamond over the object, you'd know just how far it was away, because it would read out on a meter on the optical rangefinder. And of course, that's how you had to do if you were going to fire at an enemy ship, or whatever the case may be. You'd have to know how far away things were. But anyway, we went to what's called Primary Fire Control School at Fort Lauderdale. And back at that time, Fort Lauderdale, Florida was just a sleepy little village, nowhere near as developed as it is today. There's probably, I would guess there's easily 20 or 30 times the people down there now as there were then. And they had a little sleepy old railroad station, simple white frame, and we got off there, and they took us by buses down what they call Las Olas Boulevard, right to the ocean. And lo and behold, there were our barracks, and it was tough duty. It was the Lauderdale Beach Hotel. Now, the Lauderdale Beach Hotel was, at that time, quite new. It probably was built in, I would say, no earlier than 1938, and was very modernistic looking, not by today's standards, but by those standards it was. And so that was our barracks, and it was right on the beach. And a lot of the beach wasn't developed. You'd be surprised where today you go down there, and it's just fabulous beachfront property. There was very little of that, except for this Lauderdale Beach Hotel. And so we stayed there, and because we were in school, believe it or not, they even had retained the cleaning help. We didn't even have to clean our rooms. That was pretty good duty.